Welcome again to another version of Quanser Café, where I'm taking some time to meet with leaders of academic institutions around the world, focused on engineering education. And today I'm delighted to be with a good friend of mine, Dr. Janusz Kozinski, who I've known now, I think, for 6 or 7 years or more. And Dr. Kozinski has enjoyed a distinguished academic career in leading institutions in the USA, Europe, and Canada. He's an internationally renowned higher education leader, researcher, and entrepreneur, and one of the world's most widely acknowledged experts in sustainable energy systems. Educated in Krakow, Poland, he subsequently conducted research at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and spent much of his academic career at McGill University, where he was Associate Vice Principal for Research and International Relations. He was the founding dean of the Lausanne School of Engineering in Toronto and founding president of a new university in Hereford in the UK, which is one of the most ambitious ventures in British higher education. He's currently the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering at Lakehead University in Canada, leading a new transdisciplinary initiative to apply key driving forces of the 21st century in science and engineering to create a novel type of research-based academic programs. You know, Janusz, I could go on for a lot longer with all the credentials and things that you've done, but thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today. And any initial words you wanted to comment on?
Paul, it's such a pleasure spending time with you as always, and congratulations on a terrific idea of having this cafe. I'm going to repeat that at my new university, if you don't mind.
I know, absolutely. I don't mind at all. And I have to give credit to my wife. I think it was my wife's idea to call it the cafe. And you know, I'm so excited because I'm privileged enough to travel around the world and meet people like yourself at conferences, you know, many countries. And there's always 200 or 300 people who are having these conversations, but I'd like to expand that to a bigger audience. So hopefully, of the thousands of people that are contacted and in our network, something you say, something somebody else says will resonate and make a difference in their institution. But we're going to chat about engineering education. You've got lots to say. You've got a great background. But before we get there, maybe just give us some insight into yourself as a background. I always find it interesting that students going into engineering don't really know what engineering is all about. So what was your expectations and how did you get into the field, and what's kind of continued to inspire you?
Well, so actually, how I got to engineering, well, it was quite accidental. It's a really funny story how I started engineering because I was in Poland signing up for the university, and then there was a lineup, and there was a beautiful girl just in front of me who became my wife later on, and she signed up for something. It was she had a big card that says ENG. So I signed up for ENG. The problem was that she went to English and I went to engineering. But to be honest, well, that was at the beginning. But then, look, I realized right away that what engineering is actually engineering. Engineers create everything that's not created naturally. So everywhere where you will look around, this is what we do. So it was great for somebody like me, who is a young person. We all want to change the world for the better. So that's how I approached it. And then I realized that engineering used to change how we do things. And now with AI and some other development, now is changing not only what we do, but who we are. There were some surprises for me as well, to be honest. Well, because I realized that engineering could be used as a springboard to extraordinary things. And one of those things that happened to me, it was I had an opportunity and went to space on a zero gravity flight, thanks to some of the things that I've done in engineering.
You know, I have to say, you know, in the conversations I've been having with people, I've led a very sheltered life. I mean, going into zero gravity is something I would kill for. I have jumped out of a plane. That was a very long time ago. My wife's told me never to do it again. But I know. I mean, based on your experience with Lausanne and with the university in Hereford, and now what you're working on with Lakehead, you are passionate about engineering and engineering transformation. But before we get into that, this pandemic, this last 12 months has been unbelievably challenging for everyone. And in the middle of that, you assumed this position. So have you used it to your advantage? I know that's what you tend to do. You like to take challenges and turn it into an opportunity.
At the pandemic, let me share with you two perspectives. So one is more personal perspective, which is that, of course, our world was turned upside down, and
Right.
during that time, we've seen the best of humanity, and we've learned so much about ourselves and so much about the others, and we've been inspired by the absolutely extraordinary courage of those who helped us with our everyday lives and the first the front line responders and so on. So that was, and from my perspective, was uplifting. It really helped me tremendously. From the educational perspective, I think the pandemic, to be honest, didn't change that much. What it did, it accelerated the change that was already in place. So it made the future happen faster from the educational perspective, and there was already a trend of let's call it a learning continuum, which is learning on campus, online, on demand, just in time, just in case. So it's just expanded it. But interestingly, it also flattened the socioeconomic playing field between the universities, because suddenly it became clear that it doesn't matter if you have many big buildings or big facilities and equipment and so on. What mattered is people and how good they are in interacting with students, how good teachers they are as well. So that was the change from the educational perspective.
What's your approach to balancing the curriculum with the right elements, for today's students? How do you go
Yes,
about doing that?
right. So in order to account for those elements that really matter to students to develop as full human beings, we have to change the curriculum. You see, the engineering education did not change much over the last, I don't know, 50, maybe 70 years or so. Students start the first year with math, physics, chemistry, other things, just a little bit of design that they have in the first year. So can you imagine if you wanted to study music and you couldn't use the instrument for the first year? I mean, you would be miserable. So what we need to do is we have to change that. And we developed this concept of rather than having, I think, one or maybe 2 semesters of partial differential equations, mathematics. And then at the end, as an engineer, you're going to use maybe 4 of those equations. So what we decided to do is to embed mathematical concepts and physics and chemistry in the different kind of education that is all about solving problems or doing particular research. Now, and that is it is somewhat controversial, because at the same time we have to make certain that those programs are going to be accredited. So it's very important to engage in a conversation with professional, with the regulatory body that regulates the profession, with the accreditation body. Most importantly, it is imperative to engage in the conversation with employers and students. If you ask employers, most of them, they tell you that we are not properly preparing engineering students for the workforce. So we have to make a change. Just give you an example, because when you have first year students and they come to engineering because they see that engineering indeed is changing the world. They see engineering through the lenses of companies like Apple, like Facebook, like Twitter, and so on. And then when they come, typically they start in the first week or the second week with tests in math, physics, chemistry, because professors want to prove to them what they don't know. So we told them at the beginning, forget about math, physics, and chemistry. We asked them a question, what are you passionate about? So we start with passion projects. We let them run those passion projects for the first week, and quickly they are going to realize that in order for them to, say, improve the efficiency of a water cleaning filter and so on, they have to learn a little bit about extrapolation and those mathematical equations. So they see math, physics, and chemistry, they are helping to solve the problems of the world rather than they are an esoteric or fields that they need to study.
So this is the program that you're working on with Lakehead?
Yes.
That's what you're doing there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so,
what's the reaction of the students when they come in and they have that experience to, because are they individual projects, by the way, or are they group projects?
It's a week zero. You start really from zero. So what we do is we let them select. Most of the time they work in teams. We don't want to force them. For example, there was one project was interesting because students really wanted to develop an app that is going to make more efficient distribution of food among those that are less fortunate. And then, so professors help, senior students help. What's really important there is to learn by social interactions. So another thing what we did for them, we built a big wall that is writable. Write on that wall. And what they do is they learn together with professors around sitting just around that wall. So they start with something, and then another one is going to build upon it, and another student, and so on. That's the best way of learning, because if you don't feel that you're learning, that learning is sufficient. But you see, what's really important, we realize that engineering, there are a few things that we have to see if we will be able to implement. There are two keywords. One is integration, and the other one is acceleration. So integrating means that the idea is to integrate several different engineering specialties under one umbrella. You see, if you become an engineer and you work for a company like Quanser or so,
yeah,
you want them to learn about different things. So we are exploring that. Other programs that are much more specialized. There's one program that resonates a lot with our students, but also with the public in general. We call it Invictus Engineering. That is a special program that is designed for wounded servicemen and servicewomen and veterans who are transitioning from the military to civilian life. It has to be different because they would not be able to participate in the regular program. So that's the future of engineering, being more personal, but also integrating different disciplines.
But I'm going to ask the question because you talk about integrated engineering, and intuitively that means you're going to bring people from different disciplines together: mechanical, electrical, and software, and computer science, and so on. Is the notion of those degrees something that you still believe in? I mean, should we still have mechanical engineering degrees? Should we still have electronic degrees and have this notion of interdisciplinary, or should we try and move towards a more generalized engineering?
My preference would be to have a general degree, and then rather than being specialized. But on the other, but I'm also a pragmatic person, and I know that sometimes the engineering world is better to change by evolution rather than a revolution.
Revolution, right?
So what we decided to do is, rather than tackle engineering education at the bachelor level, which is more difficult because it's regulated, it's accredited, and so on.
Yeah, right.
We started with masters. Masters is much easier. So we created the first master degree. We call it Master of Integrated Engineering. In short, it's IEng. So Master of Integrated Engineering is based exclusively on those projects, so to speak. It's an equivalent. It's an engineering equivalent of MBA. So there are people coming from different companies, and look, you may have in your company a terrific person that you wanted to put through the progression pipeline and career planning and so on, and he or she graduated in mechanical engineering, but you know that in the future it's very important for that colleague to learn more about electrical and about mechatronics and about that. So that's what we created. It's all about individual projects, flattened. Really, it's a horizontal. There's no difference between mechanical, electrical, chemical, civil, and so on. Let them learn. So it's completely opposite to a typical master's, because typical master's is if you finish mechanical, you go deep.
You talk about employability, and I know you're doing a lot of work with local industry. Like, how important is that to you, and how connected are you to the local industry bodies at Lakehead?
Yeah, so at Lakehead there is a full co-op program. So I was lucky when I stepped in. They already had a portfolio of, I think, 126 companies that they.
Oh wow!
So it's quite substantial, because I strongly believe that it is very important for engineering students to go to other places and see what other engineering programs in other countries are all about, but also learn more about people, history, geography, and so on. That's the concept of becoming a humanist engineer. So that is absolutely critical. Now, the other thing that we are also trying to implement, which may sound a bit radical, but it's relatively straightforward, is that we don't believe in traditional exams. I mean, exams, in my opinion, are complete passé. Can you imagine? You are a student and you studied for the entire semester, and then you have a final exam on a Friday evening for 3 hours, and then in the morning you learn that something went wrong in your family, or your girlfriend or boyfriend left you, and so on. I mean, and the exam is 50-60% sometimes. It doesn't make sense. So we developed the concept of assessing students in a quantitative way based on the portfolio of achievement throughout the entire semester. So, and it is about specific projects, and the students, they have to do something, make something, manufacture something, design something.
Yeah.
But we're giving them an opportunity to develop themselves as engineers.
So how do they respond to that? Because I know I've had these conversations in the past, and people say, the students say, what's on the exam? But I need an exam. I need some clarity on how I'm going to be evaluated. How do they react to this, and how do you overcome any kind of resistance?
So by the way, it's not compulsory. It's again, I strongly believe, and I mentioned, the variety is important, and it's also variety with regards to giving our students an opportunity to express themselves. So it's not that we are abolishing the final exams. No, we're giving an opportunity to our professors and students to find a consensus between themselves. So at the moment, it's in the transition. So if you have a group of I don't know, 20, 30 students, you can always find those who would prefer to have a bit more well, a clear framework, like an exam framework, and it is perfectly all right. But it is more and more students that are taking the portfolio of achievement as their exam. Well, why so? Because it's simply fun. I always tell my students, my graduate students, you should do things for the fun of it. And then if you can have fun, if you have a sense of accomplishment, because you design potentially a gear that Quanser is going to use sometime in the future, hopefully. Then you see it in a slightly different way. I think that it will ultimately prevail, although we don't want to over-regulate.
I like that approach. I have to tell you, my experience growing up was obviously the exam route when I did my engineering degree, and then when I did my MBA, I had a mark for participation, which my dad always thought was really funny. He said, "Well, you don't stop talking, so how on earth could you fail at that? You participate, but you've got to say something worthwhile, I suppose." I mean, that was the other piece of the puzzle.
So Paul, just about the exams, just one more comment about the exams. So I suggested that if we are to do the exams, perhaps what we should do is we should try to have more oral exams, this kind of conversation.
Right. Yes.
You learn more about personality, about how students think, or you can approach with questions slightly differently. Traditional exams are highly impersonal, and especially now. I told my colleagues when I just went to Lakehead, I told them that the entire educational system has evolved due to pandemic. Students are learning in a different way, and our professors teaching in a different way, while we insist on the same way of assessing them. It doesn't make much sense. So, well, we are evolving.
Well, I think I agree with you. The pandemic has accelerated things. If I think about 10 or 15 years ago, the change from the academic environment to where it was prior to the pandemic, we'd seen a shift, and I'm expecting that this has been a catalyst for bigger change. And think about preparing students for the future. Wouldn't an evaluation which is oral and personal be more similar to an interview technique that they need to get into a company to get a job? I mean, there's a lot of value there,
Yes.
and you can role play, but if there's nothing riding on it, then how do you make it, mean something to them?
Well, yeah. So Paul, you touched on to the other subject that is absolutely fundamental for engineering, because unlike many other programs, engineering is a professional program. So at the end of your education, you're going to get a profession. And what we decided to do is starting from year one, we decided to have two programs that really resonate with young people. So one is that every first year student has a mentor. Mentor is different than academic advisor and so on. I have 4 mentees, and the idea for us is to develop this social interaction and learn about if there are some problems. It's important to learn about it at the end of September, or if they start in September or October, rather than at the end of the semester where it's too late.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the other thing is to focus on career preparation. It's so important to start from year one to show students the future, to show them. So it's a career exploration guide, so to speak.
Can I just ask you another question? Because I know you're very passionate about this, and I've been talking about this a lot more in my company, and that's the notion of diversity and inclusion, specifically women in engineering. You set up this program at Lausanne for 50-50. Are you proactive in that area at all at Lakehead?
Oh, very, very much so. So we expanded it actually. Look, I learned firsthand how important it is to have diversity. But diversity, you see, is just the first step. Then you have to follow up with inclusion. So in other words, it's not just that you're going to admit more diverse students or hire more, say, female faculty and so on. You have to create a pathway for them to feel that they are included. I realized very quickly, once we were starting bringing more female students and faculty, and I remember one year we had an entering class of 34% of female students, while in Canada it would have been on average at that time maybe 16% or so. And one year we hired around, I think exactly 75% of our faculty members hired were women. And we were clear from the beginning that we are not creating preferences. You cannot do it, because then it's obvious. You have to create opportunities. So that's what we were able to do at Lakehead. We expanded it onto interactions with indigenous communities. So we implemented this concept of tinker trucks. You see, so what it is rather than bringing indigenous students to campus from time to time on a bus for a day, and they go around and they are all overwhelmed by what they see. It's just too much for anybody, actually. Then we developed those shipping containers, and inside the shipping container, when you walk in, it looks like one of our laboratories with multiple walls, with 3D printers, with machines that they can tinker with. We would take that container and drop it off at their school for a week. So they can explore it on their own time with their parents, with their teachers and so on, and then we would take it and move it on to another and another and another. So that way, it is an outreach because we are able to interact in a social way and build relationships with those communities. But also, it's important for young people to understand what the modern engineering is all about without being overwhelmed by visiting to the university.
So what kind of response? That's fascinating. I mean, so you're sending it around to different communities across the region. What kind of feedback are you getting? Are you getting more of them interested in engineering as a career path?
Yeah, so look, it's traditionally it's relatively difficult to attract indigenous students to engineering, and I have firsthand experience because I spent a couple of years as dean of engineering at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. So so I saw it firsthand. So that's why it's so important to show to not only to the indigenous communities, but to society at large, that engineering is very much a multidisciplinary enterprise. I mean, at Lakehead, we are very lucky that we are able to link. Well, we haven't done it as yet, but we've developed it almost ready for the implementation next year. We are linking engineering with business, law, and medicine. So we are lucky because Lakehead has medicine and business and law all together. That way, we are truly going to make engineering a multidisciplinary field. Well, we have to figure it out how to do it with our colleagues from the accreditation board, but the good thing that I stepped in at Lakehead is that all of the programs were just accredited last year for the maximum period of 6 years. So we have several years to engage with the accreditation body and others in order to improve of what we have, in order to make certain that we're going to be different, but not odd.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you so much, Janusz. You know, like we've said, we've known each other for a long time, and the idea of communicating to society at large just how important engineering is, I think, is a phenomenal objective. I think developing a human-oriented engineer for the future, being so cognizant of diversity and inclusion, I agree with you. You've got to make it a welcoming place. You've got to make it possible for people to interact. The simple fact that we've gone through this really challenging period, you're embracing it as a catalyst for change and to accelerate great things. And I know Lakehead's going to be better for it, and I know I'm excited also for the colleges, because I know you've been reaching out to the colleges there, the 2-year vocational colleges, so you can work to help bring people if they want to make that step from college to university. Well, thanks very much, and you know it really is a pleasure. And over the years, you know, this, I would argue, that used to be my job, but now it's I've got so many friends around the world who I can genuinely call friends because we've spent time, we've socialized, as well as discussed the challenges of engineering education. And I think it's those relationships which are going to help make the changes, make a difference. and for you taking this time, an hour of your busy time for me to have this conversation and share it with everyone. I can't thank you enough. But take care, Janusz. All the best, and we'll speak soon in person, I hope.
Thank you. I will be delighted, and let's continue over a glass of wine.
I couldn't end it any better than that. Thanks very much.